Hello, and welcome to today's Discovery Saturday presentation. Our special guest is Ken Blackburn. Ken graduated from North Carolina State University and graduated second in his class with a BS in aeronautical engineering. Blackburn studies aerodynamics for the Eglin Air Force Base Research Lab. He previously worked on advanced fighter jets and other manned aircraft and drone designs for McDonnell Douglas and for Boeing. Ken held the Guinness Record holding designer of the paper airplane aloft with paper airplane aloft for 27.6 seconds. He has also written 4 books about paper airplanes and uses the planes to explain basic concepts of flight and aerodynamics to kids and adults. Now I'd like to welcome our special guest, Ken Blackburn.
Wow, thanks. It's great to be here. I think what I'd like to do is for us to have fun, right? I'm going to try and force you to learn something about aerodynamics, which is kind of my thing. But hopefully we'll have fun. We'll maybe learn a little bit. And I'll try and give you a few lessons along the way that will help you with paper airplanes. All right. So
just for naughty school kids.
So go ahead and play that.
Blackburn. His chances for a spot in the Guinness Book of World Records are in the air with this pitch for recognition in his talent with paper aircraft. His latest creation took wing this week inside the Georgia Dome. Total flight time, 27.6 seconds, which might not sound like a lot, but the previous record was just 20.9. Still going, in case you're wondering, Blackburn also puts his skills to work as an aeronautical engineer.
All right. So I thought it was important. Thank you. I like to actually start my presentation with that video clip because it kind of explains why it is that I'm here. But that is that's my best flight time, my Guinness record for time in the air for paper airplanes. And it's with this design. We've got the pattern for that airplane on the table at the end of the presentation. Anyone who wants to can either fold them at the desk or at this table over here on your left. And I'm going to step you through it fold by fold, including the adjustments to make it fly really well. So bear with me. We're actually going to make paper airplanes. You just have to watch me get through these things. So what you can see is a picture of my book. You can see I actually came to this area. So I worked 19 years in St. Louis for McDonnell Douglas and then Boeing. And then I worked on one thing that also makes it really cool for me to be here. Besides being surrounded by airplanes, these are some of the airplanes that I've been fortunate enough to be associated with. The F-18 that you can look at the nose, I have actually worked for several years on the flight controls on the F-18 when I worked at McDonnell Douglas. The guy who sat next to me actually designed the smoke system for it. So anyway, I feel like I have a personal connection with the Blue Angels that I really enjoy every time I see them. So you'll see that I came here to work on small unmanned air vehicles. So my wife and I were thinking about moving to this area to get closer to family, and it turned out there was an ad for a job that dealt with really small unmanned air vehicles, and they were looking for anyone with experience with really small air vehicles. And I thought, hey, I've got some of the best paper airplane credentials in the world, and so I highlighted that on my submittal and I got the job. So I got to work from then on with the Air Force Research Lab, and I've kind of specialized in small UAVs, but all kinds of air vehicles, including hypersonics and all kinds of different vehicles. But it goes back to the small unmanned air vehicles is what brought me to this area. And there you saw my setting the record. And of course my website, if you ever have an interest in more information about paper airplanes, feel free to visit the website, and my email address is there too, so you can ask me anything you want. I'm an engineer, so I like to plot things. And like I like to tell kids, plots aren't there just to make your life difficult. They're there to convey information. In this case, what you can see is the record for time in the air versus year. And the first one was what the record was when I started. And then the following, most of the following dots are mine. because I've set the record 4 times. And one of the things I really like to emphasize is that the key to really doing well is practice and work. And I had this realization when I first started doing these presentations. It was to explain to people why airplanes fly, which I still do. But then I started to realize there's a much bigger message, and the one that I really hope you take away with you, which is if there's anything you want to do, you can do it. Right? It may take time, it may take practice, it may take work, but I grew up on a small farm in North Carolina, and my parents had nothing to do with aviation, and I started making paper airplanes because that's what I could afford to fly. So I wanted to make them fly better, and so I would take books on real airplanes and apply it to my paper airplanes because I started to realize they fly for the same reasons. The same aerodynamics, the lift, the drag, the control, even the pilot controls. If you look at like these airplanes with the Blue Angels, the way that they do maneuvers, the same controls that make them roll or pitch or loop are the same controls that make a paper airplane roll and spin and loop. And so you start to realize, hey, if I can understand a paper airplane, I can understand what makes all these fabulous airplanes in this museum fly. So you can be as good as you want to be at anything, but it just may take a lot of work. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. All right, forces of flight. All right, now this is my my thing. So I think some people, it should be more or less intuitively obvious. A lot of these, everything's got weight. All right. So these A4 Skyhawks, I'm guessing, are somewhere around 15,000 pounds. All right, when they fly. The F-18, I know, is about a 30,000 pound vehicle. Anyone care to guess how much a paper airplane weighs? Anyone, a guess? Ounces, grams, pounds? 2 ounces. How much? 1/10 of an ounce. Actually, that's really close. All right? So an ounce, if I remember right, is 27 grams. All right? This is about 4 grams. So 3 grams, 4 grams, you were within about 25% of the right answer. That's really good. I'm not sure how you knew that. All right. So it takes, the easy way to think of it is it takes 100 paper airplanes to weigh a pound. Almost exactly. They're about 1/100 of a pound each. But they have weight. That's the important thing. Everything, whether it's an A4 or a piece of paper, has weight. And if you don't have lift, all right, I'm going to sacrifice one of these. All right, this is actually called the paper meteor. All right. All right, so it still weighs 1/100 of a pound, right? But if I push it forward through the air, it falls just like a rock would or any other object. If I throw this, you notice it does not plummet. And the difference between those two things, they look a little different, but one creates lift and one does not, all right? I think that's kind of obvious, but that is the difference between those two pieces of paper. All right, let's move on to, okay, lift. All right, so the shape of the wing makes a difference, and the angle of the wing makes a difference. So if you look around the museum, I love doing these presentations at museums. One, I just like to go to museums, especially air museums. But if you look at the shape of the wings, you'll notice that they are curved, right, because the wings have some thickness to them. But generally, most wings are a little more curved on top and kind of more flat on the bottom, in general, right? So, and whenever you come in to land or you take off, a lot of the times you will drop the flaps, which gives the wing even more curvature and more lift, right? More maximum lift. So, but if you've ever seen the Blue Angels fly, I want to see a show of hands. How many of you have ever seen the Blue Angels fly? All right? So you've seen an airplane fly upside down, right? Now remember, F-18, 30,000 pounds. So somehow it creates 30,000 pounds of lift. That's just when it's flying level. When they're turning, it's over 100,000 pounds of lift, right? But when it's flying along, somehow the lift switches from going up this way to going up this way. If it were only the shape of the wing, that wouldn't explain how you could create lift out the bottom of the wing. But what the pilot does is the pilots are trained from early on about angle of attack, which is the angle that the wing kind of rams through the air. Does it go through nose high or nose low? If you've ever put your hand out a car window and tilted it, you can feel if you tilt your hand, the front of your hand up, it lifts your hand. If you tilt your hand down, you can feel it push your hand down. That's the same thing that happens to the wing of a Blue Angel when the pilot tilts the nose up or tilts the nose down. And if you notice, when they fly upside down, the pilot keeps the nose up. And that angle of attack is what accelerates the air over what would have normally have been the bottom of the wing to create lift in the opposite direction. So then the question becomes, how does the pilot do that? So how many of you have, I'm going to ask you a few questions along the way. How many of you have ever flown like a video game, or if you're a real pilot, or if you have ever flown a video game where you fly something, could be an airplane. Have you ever flown anything, even on the computer? All right, if you've noticed, if you've got a control stick, which way do you move the stick in order to make the airplane climb? Back, all right? Very good, thank you. So when you move the control stick back on any of the airplanes in here, what happens is that the surfaces on the very back of the airplane, normally called the elevator, deflect up. All right, it deflects the air off, and what most people, one of the keys to understanding how an airplane flies, or is controlled, really, is that the airplane is a three-dimensional seesaw. All right, you've been on a seesaw, correct? And if you were on a seesaw, is it easier to make it rotate from pushing in the middle or pushing on the end? End. I'm going to assume that people all kind of realize that it's easier to make something rotate from the end instead of the middle. Right? You get leverage. Right? You get leverage on the end. That's why all the controls on these airplanes and on paper airplanes are as far away from the middle as possible. That gives you the most leverage for making the airplane rotate. And that's why your paper airplane and why a real airplane has its controls out on the perimeter of the airplane, because it gives you the most leverage. If you've ever seen the Wright brothers airplane, it flew tail first. So they lifted the nose instead of pushing the tail down, right? It's the same thing on a seesaw. It doesn't matter whether someone lifts one end or pushes down on the other side. The effect is the same. It rotates it in the same direction. All right? So it's a three-dimensional seesaw. You control and if the seesaw is perfectly balanced, it only takes a little tiny push to make it rotate. And that's what these controls do. Airplanes, that's why balance is so important on airplanes. Who's ever heard of putting a paper clip on the nose of a paper airplane? Anyone? It's for balance, right? Balance is important. And we'll cover that in just a second. Dihedral. If you look around here, all right, so if you take a look at that airplane, notice the wings are not perfectly level. Same thing with the airplane right behind us, and the T-28, the white airplane hanging up there. The wings are not perfectly level. They're actually angled up just a little bit. It's called dihedral. Keeps the plane more upright. And what you need to realize is that for your airplane, your paper airplane, it stays upright better if the wings are up a little bit instead of down. I see so many, one of the most common mistakes with airplanes. You crease the wings and you throw it, and the wings angle down and it wants to roll over. Keep the wings up. All right, rudder. This is just like a rudder on a boat. Luckily, in this area, most people are familiar with boats. So all you need to know is if you bend the rudder right, the plane will turn to the right, left, it goes left. It works for real airplanes. Now, real airplanes, if you want to turn, normally when an airplane turns, do the wings stay level? Do you bank away from the turn or into the turn? Right? It's almost like, you do the same thing with racetracks. A lot of times the cars bank into it. It helps coordinate the turn. So normally you want the lift of the wing to pull you around the circle. I'm not going to go into the physics of that too much, except that most airplanes will bank. So normally these airplanes have ailerons or control surfaces out on the tips of the wings. Remember, it's a seesaw this way also. So if you can push up on one wingtip and down on the other, it makes the airplane roll, and you need to bank the airplane to turn well. Little known fact, the A4 Skyhawk is the fastest rolling manufactured airplane ever built, I'm pretty sure. I saw data that showed it rolls at 3 revolutions per second. And there's a placard in there that says, don't roll that fast if you have any fuel in the wings, because it will put so much centrifugal force on the outer side of the wing, it'll become like a lawn sprinkler. It'll blow the fuel right out the wingtip. So, fastest rolling airplane, ailerons. That's one of the reasons why the nickname of that airplane was Heineman's Hot Rod. Ed Heineman was the chief designer, and it really rolls fast. And one reason why that was a really good Blue Angels airplane. Okay, balance. We started talking about that. Balance is important for any airplane. Now, balance is kind of interesting in airplanes. It's not only important to keep it balanced, it does make a difference. It's more important for the weight to be on the front than the back of the airplane. Right? If you got too much weight on the front, it goes really straight, but it kind of nosedives a little bit. If you put too much weight on the tail, it pitches up and stalls, and then it kind of tumbles. Right? So, too much weight on the nose, it flies straight. Too much weight on the tail, it doesn't fly at all. So if in doubt, put a little extra weight on the front. That's why paper clips have become fairly well known as something that you add to the nose of a paper airplane. On my design, the world record airplane, you'll see lots of folds on the nose, right? And that was, it flew away. And that was specifically for balance and to give it enough weight on the nose. All right. If there are no questions, I'm going to ask that we all make paper airplanes. Now, what I'm going to do, we have tables set up over here on your left. I'm going to take both the pattern for the world record airplane and blank paper. We're going to put that over on the tables. I'm going to grab the world record airplane. If you want to fold the world record airplane, I'll show you how. If you want to make your own airplane or show anyone else, family members, anyone, how to make your own airplane, great. No problem with that. When you're done, you can fly your airplane in this area. If anyone wants to fold this, what I'm going to do is a kind of a classic, more pointed airplane. It flies straighter and a little bit faster. It's called the Eagle. There's no pattern, so I like anytime I fold the airplane without a pattern, I like to fold it in half lengthwise. It's important for the wings to be even. Right? If you fold it precisely in half this way, then your left and right wings can be the same size. And you start by folding it diagonally so that it lines up with that center crease. First on one side and then the other.
Mine doesn't fly.
And a lot of pointed paper airplanes start out that way. From here, this is where it gets a little bit different than a traditional dart paper airplane, like that one. You're going to fold the whole nose over, and ideally these creases should come up right to the corner. As long as you're closer, it'll be fine. The next fold, you want to follow that crease up to the corner. Take that corner, and you have to do two things, which is always a little challenging. You're going to touch the center crease about 1 finger width, maybe up to 2 finger widths, but 1 to 2 finger widths up from that point. Just touch the center crease and press it down. So it should be at an angle. That's kind of the most challenging fold on this without a pattern to follow. And then the other side, you're going to touch that first one right on that center line so that they're symmetric or even. Make a nice crease. All right.
So how big are the calluses on your fingers?
Paper cuts.
Oh,
Look out for those. All right, so this little triangular pad here in the middle, you can lift it up and over the other fold. That's what's called a lock fold. In the paper airplane world, that's also referred to as the Nakamura lock because he popularized it in Japan. I know that this particular pattern has been out there for at least about 40, 50 years. I'm not Blackburn, Mr. Nakamura, came up with the airplane that he at least popularized that lock fold. Now you want to lift it up and fold the whole airplane in half so that these folds are on the outside of the airplane. And you can see how that lock fold really works to hold those creases in place. Only 2 folds left. And this is a common mistake is to take the wingtip and fold it down. It doesn't fly very well that way. It will fly, but not very well. If you take this long diagonal edge at the front and rotate it over so it's even with the bottom of the airplane, all the way from the nose to the tail, so the diagonal fold, even with the bottom. Same thing with this design. Is this someone's? Right? If you fold it over like this, the airplane will fly okay, but it tends to not go very straight. If you take that long diagonal edge and you make it even with the bottom of the airplane all the way from the front to the back, it flies much better. Right? The same thing here. Flip it over, even with the bottom of the airplane, wings up. And remember, the basic adjustments I gave for my airplane are the same adjustments that work for this airplane because it's more aerodynamics, it's not airplane specific. Wings up a little bit, Dihedral, right? Keeps it more stable. These little points, this airplane's really well balanced. You only need just a little bit of up elevator, just these little points on the back, to spin them up just a teeny tiny little bit, and hopefully it'll fly straight for you. Use the rudder to make it turn left or right, and you can adjust the elevator. Kind of like my world record airplane, it works pretty well if you throw it high in the air. Sometimes it'll level off and fly for a long time.